Hello and welcome to the Calmcast, a time to feel calm and think clearly. I'm Claire Downham, the Queen of Calm, a transformational life coach. I was a burnt out head teacher who finally made the journey to calm after years of trying, and I want to prevent you from having to do the same. The Calmcast is a series of short explorations, gently guiding you back to your natural state, which is calm and clarity. Just listen like you would listen to music, with an open mind and curiosity. There's nothing else to do. Now let's relax into today's episode. So the title of today's episode is Ability, but it comes off the back of me considering that very famous quote by Henry Ford, the one that says, if you think you can, and if you think you can't, you can't. Slightly misquoted there, which is ridiculous. So I've just read it a few minutes ago. I've forgotten it. But it basically is saying that your thinking is able to restrict what you do in the world. But I suspect you've seen that that's not true. So I'm here calling BS on Henry Ford. Sorry, Henry, you're not here to answer to that because you're not with us anymore. But I've seen more and more that is not true, that our thinking about what we are capable of can be actually quite easily, when we see the quality of it and what it's all about, can be easily overridden, I think is the word that I would use. So, there are lots of examples of this that I'm sure you can think of in your own life, where you thought you couldn't do something and you probably felt a little bit anxious about it and worried about what you're going to look like or anything else, but you did it anyway and you didn't die. Because of course the fear that you feel before you do something, where that voice is in your head, it's so loud saying, what the heck do you think you're doing? You're going to look ridiculous, you can't do that, that you're not capable of that, or you're going to look stupid, or whatever it is. And that voice in your head, that thinking creates quite a lot of discomfort for most of us, I think. But we can override it. Our thinking knows absolutely nothing about what we're capable of. And I said this to somebody the other day, and it really struck home with them, because they did have a voice in their head saying that they couldn't do things and they weren't capable of things, and it was holding them back, because that is what happens, isn't it, when we think that voice is some kind of law. Michael Neal quite amusingly says it's like it's the voice of God. But that voice is not the voice of God. It is not even your voice. It is the remnants of things that people said to you. And it generally is around where we felt some discomfort before. So, for example, if when we were a child, we stood up in class and we read out our poem and everybody laughed, or the teacher said something unkind or whatever, then getting up in front of us and speaking in front of a group will look like a scary thing to do. But what's really interesting about that, and amusing in a way, is that means that something that happened to us when we were 7, for example, that's what's created that voice in your head that says, you can't do that. I don't know what is. You cannot do that. That voice that says you can't do that is the voice of some room full of annoying 7-year-olds, or a teacher who wasn't particularly nice to you. And you're a person in your 40s or 50s, perhaps in my case. That voice knows nothing about what you are capable of, because it doesn't even know you at all. It's got nothing to do. It wasn't created by you. It was created through you, but not by you. It isn't who you are. So what happens now? what happens is something that can happen very organically for people who have perhaps seen this themselves. I had a beautiful conversation earlier this week, I think it was Tuesday, with a lady who's overcome so many things. She kept calling them spanners in the works, and I said, well, maybe they were just guidance from the universe nudging you onto another path. But she's experienced a lot of things where she thought she was okay and everything was going well, and then bang, something happened and it knocked her sideways off a path that she thought was going to be her path. But she kept getting up over and over again. And I think as a result of that, she'd seen that she was capable of so much. And that's what can happen when we start to take that voice in our head, our thinking, with a pinch of salt. So I think what happens first of all is that when we feel an uncomfortable feeling, perhaps an anxious feeling about doing something, we might call that a lack of confidence, perhaps. We've probably got all the names for it, but let's say it's an anxious feeling about doing something. And either we just completely ignore that voice, or we do the thing anyway, and something happens in that voice just gets weaker somehow. The more we ignore it and the more we just show up and do the thing that the voice is saying don't do, actually what happens is that voice begins to melt away. Now, that's not always easy, but it gets easier once you understand the nature of thought. Once you start to go, oh, I only think that way because somebody was mean to me when I was 7 and said something unkind about my ability to do this thing. When you start to hold the idea of that thinking a little more lightly, suddenly it starts to look less it looks less powerful. I think that's a good word, actually. It looks less powerful than it did before. So we can, as we do that negative nelly niggly voice just starts to show up a little bit less. It doesn't show up as much. And so we start to see that we can do things even when the voice in our head says, no, you can't. And then what happens to the voice in our heads is, and I've spoken about this before, it becomes weaker. It has less energy. We start to notice those thoughts and kind of go, oh, there you are again, never mind, nothing to do with me really. And we crack on. And then eventually that voice doesn't turn up at all. It just goes. I don't know where it goes or care, quite frankly, but it does. But this comes from understanding how our system works. This is not an instruction manual. It is an instruction manual on how you work, but it's not telling you what to do. But when you start to change your relationship with your thinking and you understand your feelings better and you know that there is guidance in that, it becomes easier and easier to ignore those voices. And I think there's something about quality control, is that when you realize that most of your thinking is of very low quality, and a wonderful warning that it's at its lowest quality is how you're feeling, then it becomes this amazing, your feelings become this amazing guidance system. Because when you feel anxious, for example, about doing something, and that voice is raging in your head saying, you can't do that, you're going to look ridiculous, stop it, don't do that, somebody's going to judge you, whatever it is, that feels so awful. But that is telling you, don't pay attention to this thinking. It's telling you this thinking is off, it knows nothing about you. It's really, really simple when you see it. And when you see it in the moment, you can see where you're starting to go. And my encouragement in terms of awareness of this is because I think when you get to a 10 of levels of anxiety, and you're just not going to do the thing. it's going to be too much. Your entire body's going to pull away from that because of the levels of adrenaline and cortisol that you'll be pumping by then. So starting to notice when you are at a 2 or a 3, when you're starting to go down that train of thought, and what you do have a choice over, it is whether to continue to follow that train of thought. When you are conscious that it's there, you have to be conscious it's there, of course, in order to be able to pull back from it. So there's something really wonderful to explore with this and to get curious about, what does my 3 out of 10 look like in terms of something that's trying to hinder my ability? With this fundamental understanding that your thinking knows absolutely nothing about what you are capable of. Absolutely nothing. And once you realize that, it stops getting in the way. Michael Neill has a wonderful TED talk called Why Aren't We Awesomer? Where we're not awesomer because we listen to our thinking. And we have access to the power of the universe, but we don't access that because we are too busy listening to our noisy heads. So if you want to explore this further, you know where I am, of course. Thank you so much for listening. There's nothing to do now but bring some awareness to how this is working out in your life. Listen regularly to experience longer and longer periods of calm. This has been the Calmcast with Claire Downham, Queen of Calm. Take care and keep listening.